Hello and welcome to this special conversation on the 25th edition of the Business Today Best Business School Rankings, the Silver Jubilee issue of India's most definitive ranking of business education. The Silver Jubilee of the rankings is not only a testament to their credibility and quality, but also shows how this survey has evolved over time, tracking the way India's industry and business has also evolved over the past 2.5 decades and more. And now that we are in the era of generative artificial intelligence, the role of business schools and their graduates becomes even more crucial and significant. And that is the reason this special edition is centered around the theme of education to employment. And joining me now to debate the role and relevance of business schools in this new era are Prabir Jha, founder and CEO of Prabir Jha People Advisory. We also have with us Jaideep Kewalramani, head of Employability Business and COO at TeamLease Edtech. We have Bhavishya Sharma, the Managing Director of Athena Executive Search. We also have Aviral Bhatnagar, Alumnus of IIMA Managing and Managing Partner, AJVC. And also with me, Anand Adhikari, Managing Editor of Business Today, and Sourav Majumdar, the Editor of Business Today, under whose supervision this entire list is being put together, and you'll very soon have that edition out. So Sourav, I'm going to begin with you to set the tone for today's conversation. We have a fantastic panel of expert opinion, but what can you disclose at this stage about the best business school ranking and what has it brought to the fore?
Well, thank you very much, Siddharth. Thank you for having me on the show. I think, as you said, this is the 25th year of the Business Today India's B Schools rankings, and the 12th in partnership with MDRA, which is our partner for which does the entire validation of the figures and collection of the data. What we have found this year is, of course, pretty much on similar lines in terms of the top 5 rankings, for instance, without going into the disclosure of too many of the the stuff which I don't want to disclose. For that you'll have to read the issue when it comes out. Very soon it will be out, but clearly there is a dominance of IIMs, for instance, and government colleges in the top 5, and IIMs dominate the top 5, and only one which is SP Jain comes in the top 5. So that's still very much similar to what we used to have even at the very beginning, where of the rankings in 1998, where the IIMs of the top deck IIMs dominated the rankings like never before. So not much has changed on that front. But what has changed, Siddharth, like you rightly said, is that this ranking, this 25th edition, comes in the background of sweeping changes in the corporate and business world, which is thanks to generative AI and AI in general. Now, B schools, as we have found, and there are some very interesting columns by some of the big B school deans and directors in this issue, where they have actually said very clearly that B schools need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what they need to do differently in order that they have to prepare their students for this AI-driven new world. And that's not something very easily done. They have to rework the curriculum, and not just that, they are also wondering how AI will change the way B schools themselves function. For instance, can we look at a future where AI is actually sort of imparting the basic education to students and freeing up the faculty for higher order thinking in the interest of students? Or even changing the way how AI can change the way the admissions process is done at B schools. So lots and lots to read in this issue, Siddharth, and very interesting times, but most importantly challenging times. And I'll come to some of the other challenges a little bit in 2 minutes, if you give me just 30 seconds maybe. Basically, what we have also found is that placements is a challenge. Anand's opening essay also talks about it in the issue. Placements are a challenge. Average salaries have come down. Return on investment, which is one of the key parameters of the rankings, for the higher order B schools is actually down, whereas that ROI for the lower end is actually up. So these are some of the key things, but the good news also is that MBAs are still very sought after. People who are employing, and we have some of the primary employers here and experts in the field here who will talk to us just now. People still prefer MBAs over normal courses. So MBAs are still a preferred lot. So there's lots going for MBA students right now, but there are challenges, and there's a whole new world, AI-driven world out there.
Well, yeah, Anand, go ahead.
Siddharth, just to add, when we started this study, 4-5 months back, placement was a big issue. And when we started talking to the industry, we found 4 or 5, big, let's say mega trend. One, is the technology piece. If you talk to bankers, today they are employing more engineers than MBA or MBAs with an engineering background. Second, sustainability part, with regulation becoming, more demanding and investors, insisting on ESG, companies are now, in a way integrating this ESG, into their business model. And we have seen from Reliance, M&M, all the big corporate, giving, net zero, target. Third is the leadership in this VUCA world. And some industry expert, told us about, leadership. They say in this remote working today, when you have a workforce which is remotely working, you need different kind of skill set. And third, again, leadership, when you are dealing with Gen Zs, so the big piece is also a leadership piece there. And fourth, this entire startup culture, if you see in the last decade, we have some, 1 lakh startup registered here in India. And out of this 1 lakh, hundreds are, unicorns. And when I was talking to one VC person, and he told me that 40% of these founders have an engineering background. And if you look at the background of some of the founders like Paytm's Vijay Shekhar,
Right.
or Flipkart's Bansal, Ola's Bhavish, they all are engineers. And fourth, then the last part is the rise of this alternative edtech platforms, Coursera and edtechs and all that. Now they are like skill first platforms. So there are 4 or 5 big changes that are happening.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sourav. Thanks, Anand, for setting in context what's happening. And let's open up the debate to our experts. And all of us will pose questions to our 4-member guest panel. Prabir, I'm starting with you to take off from the context that Sourav and Anand have made. And the topic that I'm throwing at you, is there a need to reposition, reimagine management education from an employers and skills point of view? Prabir Jha, that question is for you.
So thank you very much, and congratulations to Sourav and the entire team. This is a yeoman service, 25 years to track, almost from the time I took a sabbatical and went to business schools. It's almost the same time. And I've seen business schools kind of grow, change, tumble, and I've seen companies transform and also decline. So I think it's a very important question. The simple answer is yes. I think I have always been a strong votary of management education, if for nothing else, because for the wholesomeness of that exposure. You're actually exposed, irrespective of your specialization, to being able to understand business in its different manifestations and they intersect. And I think, as Sourav also mentioned, that is going to be an evergreen reality. I still believe there's a strong value of that. But with a lot of changes, and I know that there'll be people who'll talk also a lot more on the generative AI and the AI-enabled thing. Business schools need to change and transform, including their own curriculum, their pedagogy. I very strongly again concur that a lot of routine, so-called gyan need not be wasted in the classroom time that we have. Adult learning of today must be more facilitated discussions and conversations. Everything else is available, between AI. Actually, you can have case studies being answered, by different AI solutions. So, if it's all about just getting a degree, I'll be honest, business schools, 2 years, everyone will get a degree. But I think true education will be really about elevating and leveraging AI. And I know that there are schools which are already leveraging a lot of AI, whether it's in marketing, in supply chain, in operations. I honestly think every possible elective, every possible discipline will be touched by AI. But I want to just leave as an opening thought an aspect beyond AI. At the end of the day, how do business schools actually want to position themselves? Is it about immediate placement for their batches, right? And that is the obsession with most business schools. I think I respect that, but I don't necessarily admire it. I think business schools as nurseries for leadership, nurseries for entrepreneurship. On the entrepreneurship side, as we just heard statistics, in a startup capital that India is becoming, I think things are looking better. But have we tracked greatly on leadership? I will be honest, the answer is no. And there are too many horror stories we hear. The left-brain bias is reflected in the selection criteria, in a lot of curriculum design, in the mix of students, and in the way companies have historically run. Now, when quant and data will largely get, in a way, supported, if not eliminated by AI and machine learning possibilities, we will need to look at leadership to be more imaginative, creative, inspiring, collaborative. And I don't think business schools have created that volume of leaders who are really 360-degree leaders and leaders you would look up to. They may be successful financially, business leaders. But I think the time has come for business schools also to ask themselves the tough questions. Is it all about placement of a batch, or is it about spawning the next generation of a very different breed of leaders that India definitely needs today?
Prabir has given us several topics, and I'm going to go around our panel once for quick comments, and then Sourav, draw you also in. So, Jaideep, you agree with what Pradeep is saying, particularly the point of leadership, because regardless of AI, regardless of machine learning, leadership is needed and will forever be needed, perhaps. Jaideep.
Right. So first of all, thank you for having me here, and Saurav, congratulations on the 25th this thing. Both Prabir and Saurav are good friends. I completely agree with Prabir. I mean, we are going through a transformational shift. When we talk about leadership changes, AI, generative AI is going to touch upon leaders as well. I would doubt that there is any leader who doesn't have generative AI at their fingertips. I mean, whether it's the ChatGPT app or it's the browser version, they are constantly touching upon it. And most leaders have either initiated pilots or fully embraced generative AI in their organizations. I mean, there may be some laggards who are still thinking about what to do with it, but it's here to stay. It's mainstream. I've also, in personal conversations with a lot of CXOs, found that they now can have an engaging conversation with tools like ChatGPT as if it's their executive assistant. I mean, ChatGPT has come of the age where it can mimic a tier 1 MBA graduate. It has a mind of its own. I mean, about a year and a half when it came out, it was a graduate. Now it's got the mind of an MBA grad from a tier 1 school. You can have a meaningful conversation about data, about plans, and so on. Of course, organizations are careful about what to share with that. So this is very well ingrained. What is more important is for leaders how they use the response to create engagement with their teams, arrive at decisions. I mean, it can be an input tool, but it cannot be a decision tool as yet. There will be algorithms in the future that will help with efficient decision making rather than go through number crunching and the CXO trying to make head or sense of the charts and so on. You can get a lot of narrative through that. The other aspect is how does the leader enable the organization to preempt what the leader is going to ask in terms of next. So, for example, if the tier 2 of the organization understand that the leader is going to lean on generative AI, then they can actually prepare for the meetings well, prepare for the Q&A well, get the board meetings more efficient. And the other final aspect is how is the incoming talent between the leadership of the organization and the B schools being bridged through Gen AI? Is the incoming talent going to be Gen AI ready? That's the big question.
Okay. Okay. Bhavishya, more questions that Jaideep has added. So I'm going to tease this off to you. Are Indian companies adapting to this new era in your experience and with what you know from a executive search point of view? Are Indian companies adapting?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rajab, and again, congratulations on such a big milestone. To answer your question, I don't think it's a matter of India. I think it's globally. The adaptation to Gen AI is no longer a choice. I think everyone understands the urgency of it. It's another question whether everyone understands how to leverage this. I think this is still very initial stages where organizations are getting their head around in terms of how to leverage Gen AI. But just to kind of link it back to the whole topic of where these schools are, picking up something from Prabir, what Prabir said, the value of exposure in B schools. So I'm sure if you would go and talk to alumni of B school of what is the biggest value add they had from the school, exposure, alumni network probably would be the first few things. Curriculum, I doubt would come in the top five. And that is where I think the academia needs to work a little bit more in terms of building more integration with the corporate world. Because if you ask me for my personal experience, I think there's always been a bit of a lag. I think the academia has been sort of catching up to the industry trends rather being at pace with it. And the problem with this trend is it is evolving so fast that if it's not acted upon at the right time, I think we'll be far behind in terms of producing the kind of talent which the industry would demand by the time the students would graduate from their courses. So I feel that's the biggest challenge that I potentially see, that we are far behind in adapting and interacting with the industries in terms of fine-tuning the curriculum, bringing the right exposure at the right time. And that's where we need to be, because the organizations are definitely looking for prepared talent to come on board rather than the value of the degree that they bring.
Aviral, when I was in business school, the course that I studied and recently, perhaps just 2 or 3 years earlier, I realized that what was being taught at the undergrad level in a Delhi University college was perhaps more advanced than what I had studied during my masters. But the question to you as an alumnus of IIMA, do you think business school curricula in India has adapted? Are you seeing signs of that, or are you doubtful that it's going to fully adapt in an era where placements and salaries are far more important headline grabbing items?
Firstly, thank you for having me. Quite excited to be here, and congratulations on all the milestones. I think fundamentally, at least I feel the AI wave is a little overblown. As an investor, the kind of output and startups I'm seeing don't tend to match what people are actually saying. So I think there is some distance before we get there. At least how I try to look at it is, you are either above the algorithm or below the algorithm, which
That's
means
a good
that
one.
if you're being controlled by the algorithm, you're going to have an issue. If you are building the algorithm, you're going to have a good exposure and experience. I think B schools have been there longer than a lot of these technologies, and we don't give them enough credit for being innovative. I think that universities and business schools know how to adapt. While they may be slow, the way they respond generally tends to be more long term. And as many people on this panel have already alluded to, I think the curriculum is one of the things that matters. At least for me, it was the people I studied with and the people who taught me who mattered the most. I think as long as B schools are pools of talent and the best go there, the rest will follow. So I'm not that worried. In fact, I think it'll take some time before AI actually starts taking away all these jobs that people think they're.
So, Sourav, come in on the debate, and as I hand it to you, I just want to relate a personal instance. I completely agree with what Bhavishya said, which is that I perhaps remember more my industrial attachments rather than what I studied in classroom. Many times we kind of slept through it, but the industrial attachments were the most exciting. But Sourav, I'm handing it over to you.
No, thank you, Siddharth. I think I completely agree with Prabir and the others who actually said, Prabir also hit the nail on the head when he said leadership is something which really needs to be focused on. It's a very important piece, because ultimately leaders are the ones who will create tomorrow's successful enterprises, and that's what business schools should look at creating in terms of successful enterprises, people who man them and people who lead them. So I think that is absolutely on the dot, because you need to create leaders of tomorrow who then will create enterprises which are future proof and future ready. So absolutely on that. I wanted to ask, and anybody on the panel, maybe Prabir or Jaideep or anybody can actually answer this, what is the reason this year for this particular placement crisis? What is changed? If so much is happening, if B schools are still very sought after, if MBAs are still sought after, why have placements become an issue at B schools? Would Prabir like to start off?
Prabir, you could start off and then the others could come in on that. Prabir.
So I'll give you a perspective, though, the last 5 years I've not been on the CHRO track of hiring, etc., but I see it from the ring side. And one is very situational. With the general specter of recession in the Western markets, and therefore a lot of the heavy guzzling tech companies, they're hiring. Some of the consulting firms, they're hiring, that has slowed down. So it's a very situational response. So that's the one part. I personally, however, have a slightly different take. See, the challenge is we've also created mega stars of certain corporations. Only those are the companies that we want to go to. I think that's a very artificial and possibly at some level a very arrogantly misplaced assumption. See, today there are many interesting opportunities for passing out batches. If they were only to kind of be a little more open about the kind of companies, the kind of possible starts, and possibly the compensation range. One of the things which has always been current right through, for many, many years is invariably it is the compensation and the historical brand reputation that has largely, influenced choice of companies and therefore acceptance of companies on campus. This needs to change. And therefore, I think it's a little artificial a reality. It is not that there aren't exciting jobs. We have scoped the kind of companies and jobs in a certain way, and the previous batches have done it. And, the salary metrics has always been going up. If we were to step back, it is not about where you get started. It's about what could get you onto something better. And therefore, it's the mindset that I think needs to be retweaked. But how it is, every batch comes in 2 years with stars in their eyes and they just want to kind of do better than the earlier batch. So I think it's a little misplaced and exaggerated.
Jaideep, come in on that.
Sure. So there are macro factors and some softness in the investment cycle, and Prabir touched upon that. I mean, that's causing a little bit of slack in the uptake. But one must also look at that, is this a passing shower or is this a climate change? I think most businesses are talking about the fact that we need talent that is employable on day one, and employability remains a key question. Whether it's a regular university or a premium institution like an IIT, I mean, that question mark still remains everywhere. The cost of talent is not going down. I mean, in certain sectors, there has been debate about the cost of talent, fresher talent being stagnant. But by and large, we are seeing an increase. The other aspect that we must look at is that how does the compensation stack up? It need not just be the fixed salary. There are plenty of opportunities available where you could look at the fixed ETC, the variable payouts, ESOP components, and there is so much more to do. Entrepreneurship is something that is never counted as a placement. I mean, that too should, in fact, more than a placement, it's a job creator opportunity. And organizations, in fact, the metric takers should consider if an IIM grad or IIT grad starts their own business, they are becoming a net employer rather than a job seeker. I think if you put all of these elements together, including the macro factors and what the industry is demanding, then we are seeing a fundamental shift happen in the way the uptake of this fresh talent is going to happen in the industry.
Okay. Aviral, Bhavishya, you want to come in? And my colleague Anand also wants to come in, but quick comments on this question that Sourav had posed. Aviral and then Bhavishya.
Yeah, I think that a few things are happening. So first, like Prabir mentioned, there is a macro change. Companies overhired and now they are just not hiring. I think fundamentally there's going to be a shift in the ways organizations are going to be in the future. One of the things that at least I'm seeing with AI is 10-member companies, 20-member companies, billion-dollar companies that are with very small teams. I call this the unbundling of the organization. And I think what tech did was, a company like WhatsApp, which was worth $17 billion, was just 15 people. I think the concept of an organization is
Or
going to change.
Telegram for that matter, Aviral, just to interrupt
Absolutely.
you.
Absolutely. So I think the size of organizations is going to reduce. They're going to be a lot more. The way jobs look today is going to be very, in the future is going to be very different. So I think the concept of getting hired by big firms, which are not that attractive anymore, people want to work at small firms. They probably want to build things themselves. Like was mentioned, entrepreneurship is becoming an area of interest. Although, when I look at startup data and founders coming out of colleges, it's a very minuscule number. But I think that is going to change as well. Placements, how they are today, going to the McKinseys, Bain, BCGs of the world, which was what our aspirations were, are probably not going to be the same in the future. At least I'm seeing that kind of shift happening.
Bhavishya, come in on that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, to be very honest, I feel this is a risk profile that the campuses had built for themselves. If you look at the data for the last few years, and if you take away tech, consulting, fintech organizations, just see what is the kind of spread that we had for companies coming into campuses. We had built ourselves up to that level because we were chasing certain brands, certain packages, that the exposure was very heavily towards a few industries, and those industries have taken a hit, not just in India, globally. So the campuses are soft because the large recruiters are not coming in anymore. But again, I feel this could have been probably anticipated a bit because we've all been following the industry trends, and campuses could have acted a little bit more ahead of time, understanding and diversifying the kind of recruiters they want to bring to the campus. Probably could have been a little more proactive job. We could have been in a better situation in India for sure.
Anand, come in on that.
Before that, if I just wanted to ask Jaideep one question on employability. Jaideep, we have this this whole thing about AI is one piece. I wanted to ask you, in a rapidly changing environment, overall in business, in terms of challenges where you can hardly, strategies as 5-year strategies are a thing of the past in my view. You are as good as the next 1 year or 2 years at best. In such a dynamic changing environment, how do you think B schools, apart from this whole AI business, how do you think B schools need to prepare for their students for a completely rapidly changing environment, geopolitical, supply chain problems, black swan events? How do you think all that works in terms of preparing B school students for the future?
Well, exactly. You hit the nail on its head. Like I said, it's not a passing shower, it's a climate change. I mean, the world of business has changed. A 2-year MBA needs to prepare you for what we call as the VUCA, the entire volatility, uncertainty, and all of that. But more importantly, the adaptability, the lifelong learning element, and the ability to hit the ground running is going to be extremely crucial. So rather than teaching concepts and frameworks, we spoke about it earlier in this chat, that the traditional type of learning can be relegated to the faculty using ChatGPT and the student using ChatGPT. The learning can transform beyond that. But more importantly, you can focus on the entire skill development of dealing with real life situations. In fact, the pedagogy needs to be completely transformative. More importantly, if businesses and the IITs and IIMs can sit together and design the curriculum rather than come in with these point-in-time interventions of guest lectures, internships, I mean, that's not going to work. You need innovative models like work integrated programs. You need design right at the curriculum stage. You need to look at real life case studies. Sometimes a case study could go as long as 6 months. Why not just sit down and discuss a business, simulate a real world environment? I mean, the whole pedagogy has to be transformed to mimic the real world. and bring out leaders who can be P&L leaders, who can be sales leaders, who can be business heads, rather than produce a management graduate. I mean, that's the transformational shift that we need to look at.
Anand?
Yeah, since the panelists touched upon the curriculum and the pedagogy part, my question is on the CAT exam. If I see the core structure of CAT, it hasn't changed in the last decade. Today the kind of skills we need, I mean, it's more like digital literacy, AI awareness, technological adaptability and all. Should there be a change in the CAT exam format? And second, even the cohort. I spoke to a lot of people outside, and they told me since the industry need more engineer, should we relook at the cohort also?
Okay, who wants to take that? Prabir, we'll follow the same sequence, coming to you first, putting you in the hot seat.
No, I mean, it's easy for me because I'm a little away from another mainstream corporate running around. But I think it should happen. And I think as the UPSC should the CAT or any of such exams, the kind of people you look for is what gets triggered by the kind of examination process you follow. I personally have felt, even when I used to be visiting campuses, and now that's quite some years ago, and even when my teams would visit, it could be a tic-tac-toe. It was a standard IIT, 2 years of Infosys, TCS, Cognizant, and then you've done a business school. You could just pick any resume. Your CAT could pour any resume. It was bizarre. I think, it comes to the same point. What is business school preparing you for? I personally believe it should prepare you for leadership. And leadership must be wholesome. It is not to be a financial analyst or do more spreadsheet data and all that. That does not breed leadership. It is good for junior to middle management jobs. But the crisis of leadership that I personally am very, very paranoid about, where we are obsessed with leaders, but we do little about leadership, is to flow with the kind of talent we are hiring. A good mathematical mind does not necessarily become a great enterprising leader, is not a very enterprising or inspiring leader. And I think more variety, more context of backgrounds will bring to the point that Jaideep was also saying that, how do you bring real life issues to the classroom? It is becoming too theoretical, too bookish. It's not about getting 99 percentile in CAT and saying this guy is the guy, who will be the next big CEO. I mean, Harvard data has shown that, the toppers of Harvard Business School have not turned out to be the most impactful CEOs. So I think the way we select, what we look for, soft skills, huge problem, I can tell you. You may have very sharp minds, but I mean, I don't want to talk about it today. I went to one of India's best business schools when I was with Tata's, hiring for TAS. And I remember telling the team which was anchoring it, I said, if you honestly ask me, not one of them I would pick. I mean, are they stupid people? They are not. I mean, they are all bright guys who've competed, went to the best business school possibly, completed 2 years. But there was nothing shining about them. There was just no energy. There was nothing which set anyone apart. This is a guy I want to talk to. And I think it is reflective of just that herd mentality. It's like a cookie cutter. Until CAT changes that cookie cutter model, you will continue to have the same stereotypical style of leaders, and there is going to be a worsening of crisis. They are bright people, but who says only Einsteins are great leaders? We don't need only Einsteins, we need great leaders. And that is the vacuum that I think business schools must very consciously work to fulfill.
Anand, you have set the cat among the pigeons by asking that question, and let me take that to Jaideep. Jaideep, who will bell this cat? Because it is a huge issue, and we are not even digressing into the whole exam mafia industry at this point of time.
So that your voice didn't come out clearly, but I'm assuming you want to understand what changes could be done in the CAT exam, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I would put three things. One is the ability to measure the emotional quotient. Second is the adaptability. I mean, how does a person adapt to different situations, including handling setbacks? Because that's business reality. I mean, things are changing rapidly. So handling setbacks is going to be very important. And third, and most importantly, you have to be street smart. I mean, being brilliant is one thing, but being street smart is another thing. In this world of business where things are literally changing by every week, by every month. One needs to be street smart to go and cut deals and make sure you are staying ahead of competition. So if these three elements, and I'm sure the best minds put together can come up with a scale in which this could be either measured or could come out through in the interview, and that should also form a part of the selection criteria, because that is exactly what the industries are looking for once it comes to the placement season. So if the filtering in accommodates this, then the placement should automatically see good results.
Bhavishya and Aviral, apart from the CAT point, I also want to add in that what I'm picking up from all the comments that all of you have been making so far is this debate between should business schools groom specialized, subject matter experts, or should it remain on the general management track, because that's what most of us have grown up with. So I'm adding that to the question and asking you to weigh in on the point that Anand raised. Bhavishya, starting with you and then to Aviral.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, see, this is not a new debate, but I think there's been well-known observation that CAT does have some bit of a bias for engineers. I mean, there's a reason where a large intake comes from IITs. And yeah, I feel that it's time that we kind of look at what is the kind of intake we want and what is the kind of end product that we are trying to create. I think there are gaps on both sides. There is something that we can fix right at the intake stage by sort of fine-tuning the criteria that we've been picking up the students with. And I like the suggestions that Jaideep made, very, very potent suggestions, looking at EQ, looking at problem solving again. And also, how do we groom that further to make it into a final product? I think both these things have to go hand in hand. I don't think fixing one would give us the desired result. We have to work on both sides, bringing a more desired talent to kind of go into the journey, and then fine-tuning the journey itself to be in tune with the industry to produce the kind of talent that industry would need in the end.
Aviral?
I'm probably the archetype that Prabir was describing earlier. The 99.99 percentile who went to an IIT and then went to an IIM. So I have a slightly differing opinion. I think the CAT actually does pretty well from a filtration perspective. In fact, in my year, when they made some changes to the scoring criteria, you started to see more CAs, lawyers, and non-engineers. In fact, I think it has increased significantly since I graduated about 8 years ago. I think the other thing is you can't really test or evaluate for leadership. It's something you learn through experience. I think the CAT is more focused on problem solving and filtering people at scale. Leadership is something you learn when you're actually put in the deep end. And I think at IIMA, at least, I learned how to manage time a lot better. That was a learning for me. Hopefully, I got well enough to meet Prabir's bar of people he would hire from a top B school. But fundamentally, I think that, the CAT has been changing, the selection criteria has been changing. And I think the batches have become more diverse. At least starting with my batch, there were a lot less engineers, a lot less IIT people as well. I think it's become even more balanced now. And fundamentally, when there are 2 lakh people applying, it's a little hard to have a non-objective criteria to filter, is my opinion at least.
Anand, you wanted to respond to that?
I just want to add, another point. I agree with what you said, but I just want to add, should B school introduce, let's say, failure as a learning tool. Like earlier, I talked about, the way startups are disrupting, the traditional businesses. There are more than 1 lakh, startups. We talked about the VUCA world, the uncertainty and how, businesses are coping with it. Should failure be introduced as a learning tool?
Okay, who wants to respond? Feel free.
If I could.
Yeah, Aviral, go ahead.
Yeah. I think the campus and the people there itself are so good that you're constantly failing. I think business school with the people around you is just so hard that you're really grounded. they say in your pond you're really big, but when you go to the ocean you're a very small fry. And I think that's one very big learning for me, both when I was an undergrad at IIT Bombay and then at IIMA. I always felt very humbled with people around me. So failure is like very very regular. I think it just happens outside the curriculum. That's just my observation from there. That's all.
Prabir, you were coming in on this.
No, I only had, while I agree completely that, when you're hiring at scale, you've got to also do something which is easy to filter people out. I'll give you the example of the UPSC, that's the world I at least also have experienced, right? There is a prelims, there's a mains, and of course, that entire pattern has evolved over the years, etc., etc. Because when you're looking at 10 lakh people and you've finally got to pick 500 people, it's a very, very tough process. So you've got to reject, and some type 1 errors happen at every stage. The challenge is to make sure we don't have type 2 errors creeping in. And even if we were to look at just business schools, and that's why I'm connecting with the larger purpose of why business schools exist. So when we celebrate the 25th year, this would be one thought I would leave behind. Go back to first principles. At the end of the day, let us say when the IIMs were first conceptualized, or my business school, XLRI, Asia's oldest business school, with what purpose and intent was it started? Is that still valid? You see, over the years, what has happened is it's become only a feeder to almost entry-level jobs, or at best lower middle-level jobs for companies. And that's why this obsession with placements. That's why historically, even when you start looking at the criteria for grading business schools, you looked at placement, quality of placement, compensation range, blah, blah, blah. I personally believe there must be a larger and a more strategic purpose of a business school. It shouldn't take a view of only the next year or next batch of 5 years. What are you building? Are you building for the world? Is it a leadership school? Or maybe it is not. I don't know. I may have a point of view, but I just think that whether it's an issue of failure, whether it is an issue of building more of emotional competence, or it is filtering out, is definitely the ideas that should be brought to the table. Because unfortunately, in India, and I say this even when I look at my civil service batchmates and friends, where I had guys from MIT, and I had guys who were lawyers, and there were guys who were from Mufassil colleges who competed through the same exam. I believe success is finally about what you create. And if it is only about an academic percentage and selection criteria, which unfortunately business, and I say this as being one of the so-called medal winners of in my business school days, right? I don't think that necessarily proves anything, because when you finally come into the work situation, there are many more things, not just whether you scored an A+ in 5 more papers or a B- in some other papers. And I think that entire ethos of even the 2 years at business school needs a very, very clear revamp. I remember my time, and again, I'm talking almost 25 years ago, but people sobbing just because a certain company did not shortlist you. And I was working for the government at that time. I was not there for looking for a job and trying to, console some of my classmates. I mean, it is paranoia, or when I was interviewing, a guy is moving from one room to the other. I remember I am Bangalore so distinctly. And I remember at 10 o'clock at night, I asked him, I said, first, let me ask you, are you even aware of which company you're interviewing with now? And he says, no, sir, his tie was already here. I mean, this is making a mockery of what otherwise are fine institutions, some of the finest minds, finest potential of talent that we get. So I think we have to get both on the student side and on the institute side, a complete reset of what do you stand for. Unless you do that, you will continue to be going around in circles, and the tail will wag the dog.
Sourav, 25 years of rankings, and if we were all to go and read all those 25 issues, we would also get a broad overview of how India has changed as far as its economy and business is concerned. But as I wrap up this conversation, I want to throw one question at you. A young boy or a girl with stars in their eyes who are looking forward to a business education, what can they learn from this edition and even past editions that we have put out?
That's a very pertinent question, Siddharth, because I think over the last 25 years, what BT's B schools rankings have shown and the issues have shown are the actual, questions of the day. Even this particular issue, like we said, talks about much of the stuff which we discussed at this panel discussion, which some of you, the panelists, have really beautifully articulated. And I think these youngsters need to read this with their eyes open, understanding that the world is changing. And all these changes, not just AI of course is an important part, but like we discussed over the course of this discussion, many changes, and preparing for leadership. If you want to be tomorrow's leader, you need to understand that it's not just reading the material, what is provided to you, what is given to you in college, but several things outside of it. And one point I want to leave everybody with is that, today India is the third largest startup ecosystem. Anand mentioned, over 117,000 DPIIT registered startups at this point. Are B schools doing enough to understand and prepare these students for innovation? Innovation, thinking out of the box, that's critical. If you want to be different, if you want to be a disruptor, how are you creating tomorrow's disruptors? Those are the guys who will be tomorrow's leaders. Prabir spoke about leadership. How are you going to change the game? Are B schools doing enough to change the game, to make leaders of tomorrow understand that these are the critical things which they need to be aware of? These are the questions I think these issues past and this particular issue are discussing.
Absolutely. And as we end this, I just want to leave all of our viewers and hopefully some young Indians with this thought. We have spent 25 years and great colleagues, great teams who have stayed here, worked here, moved on, who have put together this edition. So in some ways, the Business Today ranking provides you a glimpse into the right choice. But making that right choice should be a mix of factors. It should not just be guided by one single factor. And hopefully during the course of this debate, you have heard from this very diverse, very well-placed expert opinion on what you can do as a young Indian who is looking forward to a business education. Prabir Jha, Jaideep Kewalramani, Bhavishya Sharma, Aviral Bhatnagar, and Sourav and Anand, thank you very much for your time with us today. With that, it's a wrap on this special show on the Business Today Silver Jubilee issue of India's best business schools. That edition is going to hit the stands very soon, so do go and pick up that copy, and we'll come back to you with more slice and dice content from that. If you've been, thank you very much for watching. We'll slip into a break. See you very soon.